I mean, I think Herbie was making a joke yesterday, and he apologized for making that joke yesterday, but nobody here wants to see less football played. Michigan wants to play as much football as they can. You know, nobody was saying this about Penn State. They want to play as much football as they can. You know, they went into a game winless against Michigan and came out with a W because they want to play football. I think that the characterizations of Jim Harbaugh in these instances are unfortunate and bad. Like, I make my jokes, you make your jokes, but when it comes to actually putting down what you believe, I believe the man wants to play football. He wants to win. And he wants to leave Michigan at some point with a win against Ohio State. Like, he does not want to be a head coach that didn't beat that team. He understands what that game means to his fan base. He understands what that game means to him. Like, I think the man has enough hubris to want to go out there and think that he can win with what he's got right now. I believe that. And he gets testy about being asked, you know, about effort and about the coaching and about his quarterback play. He wants to win, right? And that's what makes that game so interesting and so much fun. Both of those teams can't stand each other. And what I've learned most about teams that can't stand each other, they want to beat up on each other. They really want it. Like, I was even thinking about this in relation to Texas. I don't think that Tom Herman's overall record at Texas is the reason why people are upset with him, though it ain't helping. I think having one win in like 5 opportunities against Oklahoma is the reason why people are upset with him. It's kind of like what's going on with Michigan, Ohio State. Jim Harbaugh put together what is a pretty decent record. I don't like Tom Herman. Better than Tom Herman up until here recently. He just can't beat the rival. And that's the game that seems to matter the most. That's the game that everybody keys on. And for y'all to keep saying that you think that Michigan wants to dodge that game because they can't win it is counterintuitive to everything that we know about football. Football is based on trench warfare. It is based on the Great War, right? It is based on our men versus your men. Let's see who comes out on top. Like, that's what it is. It was so violent a game that Teddy Roosevelt made them change the rules and created the NCAA. Like, that's where this game comes from. And Michigan and Ohio State have been playing it since the 19th century, like 1890, 1891, right? Like, that's what we're dealing with here. You got to understand that. You got to go forward with that history in your brain. Let's see what else we got in here. It's time for the College Football Playoff Committee contract with the Rose Bowl. Sole reason the playoffs are not delayed for the expanded this year. No, they're not delayed or expanded this year because ESPN owns the rights to the games, and they also know that the NFL is starting like literally the next week, right? Like, it's a clear case of college football does not generate as much revenue as the NFL. Period. Right? The NFL is approaching $20 billion in annual revenue. College football as a whole gets close to like $5 billion, right? That's what you're dealing with. For perspective there, Major League Baseball goes 10 to 15 billion, right? Like, you're just not dealing with as much money. And that's another reason why I've been like, grow the inventory, make the playoff a national thing by saying Conference USA, your champ gets in. WAC, your champ gets in. Of the 10 FBS conferences we have, automatic qualifiers, right? And then seed the other 12 teams or 14 teams, right? Or 6 teams, depending on whether or not you want a 16 or 24 team playoff. Like, all that stuff matters 100%. Let's see. I'm a Buckeye and can 100% agree that they were overrated. But this season, I think almost everyone except Bama is overrated. COVID sucks. That's a decent and reasonable take, right? Like, I've said that from the jump. Alabama is far and away the best team in college football this year. Then you can really take a look at 2, 3, 4, and you can make an argument for every last one of them to be at 2, every last one of them to be at 3, every last one of them to be at 4. Then you got your one-loss SEC teams, right? But I also think this is important to point out. There are 4 teams in the top 8. There are 3 teams in the top 6 from the SEC. So even in this age of COVID, it is clear to me which league the committee values the most, thinks the most of, believes is the most competitive, and believes plays the best football. Now, that's also probably what you're going to deal with in a 16 to 24 team playoff situation. You're going to deal with probably seeing 6 to even 7 or 8 teams from the SEC playing in that playoff, because you'll get your conference champ, and then you'll probably get your runner-up, and then you probably get your 2 runners-up in the division, right? Like that's at least 4 that I can think of off the top. And then depending on how you feel about, say, an Auburn team that goes and beats Alabama and then, basically punches their ticket out of the playoff and punches a ticket into the Outback Bowl, like that's what we're going to be talking about. Would the Big 12 get more than 2 teams in? That's an interesting question, right? That's what you would probably deal with. You would deal with more Power 5 teams getting into the playoff than Group of 5 teams. But the Group of 5 teams, would it have at least 5 teams in a 16-team or 24-team playoff? It's just a clear case of money and branding and power. And the only way to get those things is being invited to the table or to consistently beat down the door. Like Clemson is in the ACC. That's why Clemson is happening, right? In the way that Alabama was happening from 2009 to like 2015 when Clemson announced itself. I find all that stuff to be interesting. I think that when we look at Central Florida, for instance, outside of the Power 5, they would have to be undefeated for like 3 years in a row for us to start treating them like a Power 5 team. Cincinnati would have to go on this run for the next 2 years, and it's really difficult to do those things when you don't have as much money as the others, because you can't keep your coaching staff, you can't always recruit with everybody else, and you're going to have to consistently overperform. It makes it difficult for us to entertain you as a year in, year out in our brains as a contender, right? Like that's what we're dealing with. It's one of the reasons why trying to fix college football is fraught in general. And there are people that want to tell you that college football is way more than just winning a national championship. Well, that's what we made it. And that's what the sport has become. Like the NFL is about winning the Super Bowl, okay? I don't see a problem with that, especially when you can say you won a division title or you made the playoff, right? Or you made the conference championship game. Those things are important too. But an extended playoff in this instance lets you have those conversations. It has meaning that you won the American championship to the rest of us and not just in the American, right? It has meaning that you won the WAC, that you won Conference USA, that you won the MAC. That stuff matters. Like what Buffalo has been doing in this limited amount of time would matter tremendously. We'd be talking about Jared Patterson so much more. I think he's the first back-to-back 300-yard back since Ricky Williams in like the 20th century. And he's halfway to tying the record for all-time 300-yard rushing games with Barry friggin' Sanders, who did that 4 times in 1988, which is bonkers. Like, I understand how people want to talk about this, but I also think that most people want to talk about their teams. They don't actually want to talk about college football. This is a college football channel. I love college football, right? Like, if Grayson McCall gets into the Heisman conversation, cool. I'm not going to vote for him because I think there's a better player. But I like having Grayson McCall in that conversation the same way y'all like having Zach Wilson in that conversation. But y'all want to put Zach Wilson in that conversation without putting Grayson McCall in it, or Malik Willis for that matter, right? Because Grayson McCall and Malik Willis don't play at BYU. And BYU exists in your brain as something of a brand name, right? Going back to 1984 with the Holiday Bowl and them winning and claiming a national championship over the top of a 7-win Michigan team. Like, people don't really want to think about it in those manners and in that way. And I think that's important.